Single alien SOS sparked humanity's full military wrath. The Deep Space Monitoring Station Vigilance drifted silently through the Kepler sector, its massive sensor arrays scanning the void for any sign of trouble. Lieutenant Commander Catherine Okafor sat at the primary communications console, her fingers dancing across holographic displays as she processed routine transmissions from across human space. The night shift was usually quiet. Trade manifests, weather reports, diplomatic chatter, nothing that required immediate attention. Catherine preferred it this way. After 12 years in the Terran Communications Corps, she'd learned to appreciate the peaceful moments between crises. That peace shattered at 0347 hours. The distress signal came through on an emergency frequency, weak and broken by distance. Static filled most of the transmission, but underneath the electronic noise, Catherine heard something that made her blood run cold. Pure, desperate terror. "Anyone, please respond. They came from nowhere." The voice was melodic, almost song-like, typical of the Lyrani species. But this Lyrani was screaming. "Our children are dying. Cities burning. Need immediate..." The signal cut to white noise. Catherine's hands flew across her console, her training kicking in as she worked to clean up the transmission and trace its source. The Lyrani were known throughout the galaxy as peaceful artists and philosophers. They had no military, no enemies. Their world of Harmony's Rest was considered one of the safest planets in known space. "Control, this is communications. I need Commander Voss down here immediately." Catherine spoke into her headset, her voice tight with urgency. Commander Alexei Voss arrived within minutes, still pulling on his uniform jacket. The grizzled veteran had served in 3 different wars and knew the sound of genuine panic when he heard it. "Play it again," he ordered, listening intently as a desperate Lyrani voice filled the communications center. "Source?" Voss asked grimly. "Harmony's Rest, sir. Signal strength suggests they're using emergency broadcasting equipment. Whatever hit them took out their primary communications array." Voss pulled up the sector map on the main display. Harmony's Rest sat in a relatively isolated system, 3 days from the nearest Galactic Council patrol route. The Lyrani had chosen the location specifically for its peace and tranquility. "Send it up the chain," Voss ordered. "Full priority." The distress call reached Earth within hours, transmitted through the quantum communication network that linked all human colonies. It arrived at Terran High Command during the morning briefing, where Admiral Hiroto Sasaki was reviewing fleet dispositions with her senior staff. Admiral Sasaki was a woman who commanded respect through competence rather than intimidation. At 52, she had silver threading through her black hair and scars on her hands from her early days as a fighter pilot. She'd earned her rank through decisive action and an unwavering commitment to protecting innocent life. "What do we know about the Lyrani situation?" she asked her intelligence chief, Colonel Damon Cross. Cross pulled up files on his tablet, his expression grim. "Peaceful species, Admiral. Population of about 4 million. They're artists, musicians, philosophers. Never been involved in any conflicts. Their technology is primarily focused on creativity and environmental harmony. Enemies? None that we're aware of, sir. The Lyrani have been model galactic citizens for over 2 centuries. They trade art and music for resources, maintain positive relations with all neighboring species." Sasaki studied the tactical display showing Harmony's Rest location. It was far from major trade routes, in a region of space most species considered unimportant. "Council response?" she asked. "That's where it gets interesting," Admiral Cross said, pulling up diplomatic communications. "The Altarian Federation says they're dealing with border disputes. The Centauri Alliance claims their fleets are committed elsewhere. The Vegan Republic says Harmony's Rest is outside their sphere of influence." One by one, every major galactic power had found reasons to ignore the Lyrani's cry for help. Admiral Sasaki felt something cold settle in her stomach. She'd seen this pattern before, the strong abandoning the weak when it became inconvenient to help. "What about our assets in that sector?" "Third Fleet is conducting training exercises in the Proxima system, Admiral, 8 hours from Harmony's Rest at maximum burn." Sasaki stood up from the briefing table, walking to the massive viewport that looked out over Earth's orbital defense platforms. Hundreds of human warships hung in formation, their hulls gleaming in the light of Sol. "Admiral," Cross asked, "your orders?" Hiroto Sasaki had joined the military because someone had to stand between innocent people and the darkness that existed in the universe. She'd risen through the ranks by making the hard choices that other officers avoided. "Signal Admiral Torres aboard the Retribution," she said firmly. "Full fleet mobilization. I want every available ship ready for combat operations within 6 hours." "Sir, that's our entire third fleet. 47 vessels, including 3 dreadnoughts. If we commit that much firepower to an unknown situation, then we better make sure we bring enough ships to handle whatever we find there," Sasaki interrupted, "because I won't let another peaceful species die while the galaxy watches and does nothing." The alarm klaxons began wailing across Terran Fleet Base Armstrong as Admiral Sasaki's orders spread through the command structure. In the pilot quarters of the Dreadnought Retribution, Captain Kai Nakamura was reviewing maintenance reports when his communicator buzzed. "Captain, this is Admiral Torres. Report to the bridge immediately. We have a code red situation." Nakamura was fully dressed and running toward the bridge within 2 minutes. The Retribution was the newest ship in the human fleet, a massive vessel designed to project power across interstellar distances. Its weapons could crack moons, and its armor could withstand the firepower of entire enemy fleets. "Situation report, Admiral," Nakamura said as he arrived on the bridge. Admiral Isabella Torres was a small woman with fierce eyes and a reputation for tactical brilliance. She'd earned her position by outthinking enemies who underestimated humanity's military capabilities. "Distress call from the Lyrani homeworld," Torres said, bringing up the transmission. "Every major power in the galaxy has refused to respond." Nakamura listened to the desperate plea, his jaw tightening as he heard the terror in the alien voice. "What's the fleet status?" "Full mobilization, Captain. Third Fleet will be ready to jump in 4 hours. Your ship will lead the assault group." "Assault group?" Nakamura asked. "Do we know what we're up against?" Torres pulled up intelligence reports on the main display. "Unknown, but given the speed of the attack and the complete communication blackout, we're assuming hostile forces with significant firepower." Throughout the human fleet, similar conversations were taking place. On the heavy cruiser Thunderstrike, Captain Nova Chen was briefing her crew on the mission parameters. The ship's Marines were loading combat gear and medical supplies for civilian evacuation. "Listen up," Chen announced over the ship's communication system. "We're going to help people who can't help themselves. Some of you have families. Some of you have children. Remember that when we get there, somewhere in space, innocent families are counting on us to do the right thing." In the fighter bays, pilots were running pre-flight checks on their combat craft. Squadron leader Raven Park had flown missions in 3 different conflicts. But something about this one felt different. "What do you think we'll find out there?" asked Lieutenant Orion Blake, one of the newer pilots. "Trouble," Park replied, checking her fighter's weapons systems. "But that's what we signed up for. Somebody's got to be willing to fly into the darkness when good people call for help." The medical bays were preparing for mass casualties. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Luna Vasquez had served in disaster zones across human space and knew what to expect when they reached their destination. "We need to be ready for anything," she told her medical teams. "The Lyrani have different physiology than humans. Study these files. Learn their anatomy. When we get there, every second will count." As the hours passed, status reports poured in from across the fleet. Weapons loaded, engines primed, Marines equipped, medical facilities prepared. The human war machine was awakening, and its target was the unknown force that had dared to attack innocent civilians. Admiral Torres stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching as the final preparations were completed. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, their faces set with grim determination. "All ships report ready, Admiral," announced Commander Zoe Harper from the communications station. Torres nodded, looking at the tactical display showing their destination. In a few minutes, they would jump across space to fight an unknown enemy in defense of people they'd never met. It was exactly the kind of mission that defined humanity's place in the galaxy. "All ships, this is Admiral Torres. Jump coordinates are locked in. Prepare for hyperspace." The fleet's hyperspace jump was violent and disorienting, space-time bending around the human vessels as they crossed impossible distances in minutes. When they dropped back into normal space near Harmony's Rest, what they found made even veteran officers curse in horror. Oh, the planet was dying. What had once been a world of stunning beauty, floating cities connected by bridges of living crystal, gardens that glowed with bioluminescent art, was now a scene of devastation. Orbital bombardment had shattered the crystal bridges, turning them into deadly rain that fell on the cities below. The glowing gardens were blackened craters, their light extinguished forever. "Mother of God," whispered Captain Nakamura as he stared at the tactical display. "Contact report," called out Lieutenant Commander Hiroto Wright from the sensor station. "Multiple vessels in orbit. Configuration unknown. They're not in any database." The enemy ships were unlike anything in human records. They appeared to be grown rather than built, their hulls covered in what looked like chitinous armor. Strange organic protrusions extended from their sides, pulsing with sickly green light. "Size comparison?" Torres asked. "Each enemy vessel is approximately 1.5 times the mass of our heavy cruisers, Admiral. 15 ships total, positioned in a defensive formation around the planet." Torres studied the enemy formation. The alien ships were arranged to provide overlapping fields of fire while maintaining bombardment positions over Harmony's Rest. It was an efficient tactical arrangement, designed to destroy ground targets while protecting against fleet attack. "Admiral, we're receiving transmissions from the surface," reported Commander Harper. "It's faint, but I'm detecting Lyrani survivors in underground shelters." On the main screen, a translation appeared. "Please, if anyone can hear this, our children are in the deep caves. The monsters are hunting them. Please help us." Torres felt something cold and dangerous settle in her chest. She'd spent her career preparing for moments like this, when human military power was the only thing standing between innocent people and annihilation. "All ships, this is Torres. Rules of engagement are weapons-free. Priority is protecting civilian populations. Unknown vessels, you have 30 seconds to withdraw from the system or be destroyed." The response came not in words, but in action. The alien ships began turning toward the human fleet, their organic weapon systems glowing with building energy. "Admiral, they're charging weapons," Wright reported. "All ships, attack pattern Delta. Hit them fast and hard before they can coordinate their defense." The battle began with the destroyer Lightning making the first strike. Captain Axel Rodriguez pushed his ship's engines to their limits, accelerating toward the nearest enemy vessel at speeds that would have crushed most alien crews. The destroyer's particle cannons opened fire, sending streams of coherent energy across space. The alien ship's response was immediate and terrifying. Instead of conventional energy weapons, it fired what appeared to be living projectiles, writhing masses of organic matter that moved through space like predatory animals. "Evasive maneuvers!" Rodriguez shouted as the bioweapons closed on his ship. The Lightning twisted through space in patterns that would have been impossible for vessels designed by less resilient species. Most of the organic projectiles missed, but one struck the destroyer's port shield array. What happened next made Rodriguez's blood run cold. The bioweapon didn't explode like a conventional missile. Instead, it began to burrow into his ship's hull, eating through armor plating like acid. "Hull breach on deck 7, reported his damage control officer. "The weapon is growing inside our ship." Meanwhile, Captain Nakamura was leading the retribution against the largest enemy vessel. The Dreadnought's massive guns spoke with thunder, sending concentrated firepower into the alien ship's organic armor. The enemy vessel shuddered under the impact, green ichor leaking from the wounds in its hull. But the alien ship didn't die easily. As the Retribution's weapons tore into its armor, the creature, for Nakamura was beginning to realize that's what it was, began to change. New weapon growths erupted from its sides, and its entire structure seemed to adapt to the human attack patterns. "Sir, the enemy vessel is regenerating damage faster than we can inflict it," reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Storm Garcia. Nakamura studied the battle display, his mind racing. These weren't ships in any conventional sense. They were living creatures, possibly bred specifically for space combat. Their ability to adapt and regenerate made them incredibly dangerous opponents. "All batteries, focus fire on a single point," he ordered. "Don't let it heal. Burn through to the vital organs." The Retribution's weapons concentrated their fire on one section of the alien creature's hull. The focused assault overwhelmed the being's regenerative abilities, burning through armor and flesh to reach whatever passed for its heart. The creature convulsed, its weapon growths going dark as it died in the vacuum of space. Across the battle zone, human ships were learning hard lessons about their new enemy. The bioships were tough, adaptive, and utterly alien in their methods of warfare. But they were also slow to react to the rapid maneuvers that human crews could execute. Captain Nova Chen, aboard the Thunderstrike, was exploiting this weakness, using her ship's superior acceleration to stay ahead of the bioweapons while hammering the enemy vessels with precision strikes. "These things fight like animals," she told her crew over the ship's intercom. "They're aggressive, but not particularly intelligent. Stay mobile, hit their weak points, and don't let them get their claws into you." The tide of battle began to turn as human adaptability proved superior to alien biology. Squadron leader Raven Park's fighters discovered that the bioships had trouble tracking small, fast-moving targets. Her pilots began strafing runs against the creature's weapon growths, crippling their ability to fight back. "All fighters, this is Park. Target the pulsing nodes on their hulls. Those appear to be their primary weapon systems." As the human fleet systematically destroyed the alien bioships, disturbing intelligence was coming from the planet's surface. Marine recon teams had been deployed to locate survivors, and what they found in the ruins was worse than anyone had imagined. Major Dante Kozlov led the first rescue team into what had been Harmony's Rest capital city. The floating crystal structures lay in ruins, their ethereal beauty replaced by scenes of devastation that would haunt his dreams. "Command, this is Kozlov. We have visual on the surface situation. It's bad, sir. Really bad." The Lyranee who had survived the initial bombardment had been hunted through their ruined cities by creatures that defied description. The things were clearly related to the bioships, the same chitinous armor, the same organic weapon systems, but adapted for ground combat. "Sir, these aren't raiders," reported Sergeant Luna Blackwood over the radio. "They're not taking prisoners or looting. They're just killing everything they find." Kozlov pushed deeper into the city ruins, following faint life signs detected by his suit's sensors. What he found in an underground shelter made him understand the true horror of what they were facing. The shelter contained nearly 100 Lyranee civilians, men, women, and children who had hidden from the monsters above. But they hadn't been safe. The bio-creatures had found ways to infiltrate even the deepest bunkers, hunting the terrified civilians through the darkness. "Don't be afraid," Kozlov told the survivors through his suit's translator. "We're here to help. You're safe now." But as he looked at the fear in their large, luminous eyes, Kozlov realized that safety was a relative concept. These people had watched their entire civilization burn while the galaxy stood by and did nothing. Their trust in anyone coming to their aid had been shattered, along with their crystal cities. As the rescue operations continued, the full scope of the tragedy became clear. Of Harmony's Rest's 4 million inhabitants, fewer than 50,000 had survived the initial attack. The bio-creatures had been systematic in their destruction, targeting not just population centers, but also art galleries, music halls, and the philosophical schools that had been the heart of Lyranee culture. Dr. Luna Vasquez worked tirelessly in the field hospitals, treating injuries that seemed designed to cause maximum suffering rather than quick death. The bio-creatures' weapons didn't just wound. They infected, corrupted, tried to turn living tissue into something else. "These weapons aren't meant to kill quickly," she reported to Admiral Torres. "They're designed to cause fear, to break the spirit of the victims. This isn't warfare. It's torture on a planetary scale." The intelligence picture that emerged from captured bio-creatures was even more disturbing. The beings weren't just mindless animals. They were guided by some form of collective intelligence that viewed other species as nothing more than raw material for biological experimentation. "Admiral, you need to see this," called Lieutenant Commander Wright from the sensor station. "Long-range scanners are detecting movement in the outer system, multiple contacts closing on our position. Torres studied the tactical display as new contacts appeared on the screen. Dozens of bioships were approaching from the system's edge, drawn by the battle around Harmony's Rest. "Fleet composition?" she asked. "Unknown configuration, Admiral. They're larger than the ships we just destroyed, much larger." As the new contacts came into sensor range, their true size became apparent. Each bioship was massive, easily the size of a human space station. Their hulls were covered in weapon growths that pulsed with malevolent energy. "Admiral, incoming transmission," Harper reported. "It's not from the bioships. Source appears to be inside one of them." The voice that came through the speakers was clearly artificial, a machine intelligence speaking through organic vocal cords. "Human vessels, you have interfered with a harvesting operation. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Torres stepped forward, her voice cold with fury. "This is Admiral Torres of the Terran Fleet. You have attacked innocent civilians and committed acts of genocide against a peaceful species. You have one opportunity to surrender before we destroy every last one of you." The artificial laugh that echoed through the speakers was utterly without humor. "Humans, your species is noted for its arrogance. You will serve as excellent subjects for our biological enhancement programs." "Enhancement programs?" Torres asked. "The weak species of this galaxy require improvement. We harvest their genetic material and reshape it into more useful forms. The Larini were too fragile, too focused on useless pursuits like art and music. We will transform them into proper servants." The transmission cut off, and the massive bioships began moving toward the human fleet with purposeful intent. Torres felt something crystallize in her mind as she understood what they were truly facing. This wasn't a territorial dispute or a resource conflict. These creatures were strip mining entire civilizations, turning sentient beings into biological weapons. "All ships, this is Torres. Full combat alert. We're not just fighting for the Lorraine anymore. We're fighting for every peaceful species in the galaxy." The second battle was unlike anything in human military history. The massive bioships fought with coordinated intelligence, adapting their tactics in real time as they learned from each human maneuver. Captain Rodriguez aboard the Lightning found himself facing a creature the size of a small moon. His destroyer's weapons seemed insignificant against the bioship's bulk, but he'd learned from the first engagement. "All weapons, target the neural clusters," he ordered. "If these things have brains, let's give them headaches they'll never forget." The destroyer's particle cannons lanced out, striking the pulsing nodes that seemed to coordinate the bioship's movements. The creature writhed in apparent pain, its weapon fire becoming erratic as its nervous system was disrupted. Meanwhile, the Retribution was engaged in a slugfest with 3 of the giant bioships. Captain Nakamura had discovered that the creature's size was both an advantage and a weakness. They were powerful, but slow to maneuver. "Take us into close range," he ordered his helmsman. "Get us inside their defensive perimeter." The dreadnought accelerated toward the nearest bioship, its armor taking hits from organic weapons that tried to burrow into the hull. But human armor was designed differently than the materials these creatures were used to fighting. The bioweapons found no purchase on the Retribution's hardened battle plating. "All batteries, point-blank range," Nakamura commanded. "Burn through their core." The ship's massive guns fired directly into the bioship's hull, the energy beams boring through layers of organic armor to reach vital systems beneath. The creature's death throes were spectacular, its entire mass convulsing as neural feedback tore through its distributed nervous system. As the battle raged in space, the situation on Harmony's Rest was becoming clearer. Major Kozlov's teams had discovered that the bio-creatures weren't just randomly destructive, they were systematically harvesting genetic material from their victims. "Sir, we found processing facilities in the ruins," reported Sergeant Blackwood. "The creatures were collecting Lorraine DNA, apparently for some kind of biological weapon program." The implications were staggering. If these creatures could turn peaceful species into weapons of war, no world in the galaxy would be safe from their depredations. "All units, priority is destroying those facilities," Kozlov ordered. "Nothing gets off this planet that might help them create more of these abominations." The human Marines moved through the ruins with methodical precision, their weapons tearing apart biolaboratories that contained horrors beyond imagination. In one facility, they found Lirani being kept alive while their bodies were slowly transformed into something else. Part organic, part machine, no longer truly sentient. "Burn it all," Kozlov said quietly. "Every last trace." In space, the tide of battle was finally turning in humanity's favor. The bioship's collective intelligence was learning from human tactics, but not fast enough to prevent their systematic destruction. Admiral Torres stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching as the last enemy vessel was reduced to drifting organic debris. The victory felt hollow, though. They'd saved what remained of the Lirani, but they'd also discovered something that would haunt the galaxy for years to come. "Admiral, we're receiving reports from deep space monitoring stations," Commander Harper announced. "Similar attacks have been reported in 17 different systems over the past 6 months." Torres felt her blood run cold. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a campaign of systematic extermination that had been going on while the galaxy's attention was elsewhere. "Get me a direct line to Terran High Command," she ordered. "Full priority transmission." The message that reached Earth hours later would trigger the largest military mobilization in human history. Admiral Sasaki read the reports from Harmony's Rest with growing horror, understanding that humanity had stumbled upon a threat that dwarfed anything they'd previously encountered. "How many species have already been taken?" she asked Colonel Cross. "Unknown, Admiral. The bio-creatures seem to target isolated worlds first, places where they can operate without interference. Based on the pattern, we estimate they've destroyed at least 20 civilizations." Sasaki walked to her office window, looking out at the defense platforms orbiting Earth. For the first time in her career, she wondered if humanity's military power would be enough to face this threat. "Colonel, I want every available ship readied for immediate deployment. Contact our allies, the ones who actually showed up when we called for help. It's time to show this galaxy what happens when someone threatens innocent people." The call went out across human space and beyond. Species that had stood with humanity in previous conflicts responded immediately. The Altarian Federation, despite their earlier excuses, quietly began moving fleets toward human space. The Centauri Alliance offered their advanced shield technology. Even the proud Vegan Republic sent ships to join the growing armada. But it was the survivors of Harmony's Rest who provided the most crucial intelligence. The Lirani, who had witnessed the bio-creatures' operations firsthand, could provide details about their tactics, their weaknesses, and most importantly, their origins. "They came from the dark spaces between stars," one survivor told Dr. Vasquez through a translator. "Places where light never reaches." They spoke of the great hunger, of feeding on the essence of entire worlds. As intelligence teams pieced together the fragments of information, a terrifying picture emerged. The bio-creatures weren't just raiders, they were the advanced scouts of something far worse. The great hunger was coming, and it viewed every living world as nothing more than a meal waiting to be consumed. Admiral Torres stood in the ruins of Harmony's Rest capital, watching as the last of the survivors were evacuated to human ships. The crystal spires that had once reached toward the stars lay broken on the ground, their light extinguished forever. "Admiral," Major Kozlov approached, his armor scarred from battles in the ruins. "We've completed the evacuation. 47,000 survivors, sir." "That's all that's left," Torres nodded grimly. "Out of 4 million people, fewer than 50,000 remained. An entire civilization reduced to refugee status, while the galaxy's major powers had made excuses." "Major, I want you to remember this moment," she said. "Remember what happens when good people have nowhere to turn. Remember the cost of indifference." The human fleet departed Harmony's Rest with a cargo more precious than any treasure. The survivors of a gentle species who had learned the hard way that the universe contained monsters. But they also carried something else, a burning determination to ensure that what happened here would never happen again. Back on Earth, Admiral Sasaki was addressing the Galactic Council via subspace transmission. Her words were broadcast to every world in known space, carrying a message that would reshape interstellar politics forever. Fellow beings of the galaxy, she began, her voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. Humanity has discovered a threat that endangers every living world in our spiral arm. The bio-creatures that destroyed Harmony's Rest are part of a larger force that views all life as raw material for their twisted purposes. She paused, letting the implications sink in across dozens of worlds. Some of you chose not to answer the Lyrani call for help. You had your reasons: political considerations, military commitments, territorial disputes. But I want you to understand something clearly. The Great Hunger doesn't care about your politics. It doesn't respect your borders. It doesn't distinguish between military targets and civilian populations. The transmission showed images from Harmony's Rest, the devastated cities, the processing facilities, the few traumatized survivors. When they come for you, and they will come, remember that you could have stood together. Remember that you chose to let innocents die rather than risk your own safety. And remember that humanity will be there, because someone has to be willing to stand in the darkness when the monsters come calling. The response to Sasaki's transmission was immediate and dramatic. Species that had remained neutral suddenly found ships available for joint operations. Governments that had claimed neutrality began sharing intelligence about suspicious activities in their territories. But for the human military, the real work was just beginning. The bio-creatures had revealed capabilities that challenged everything humanity thought they knew about warfare. Vessels that could regenerate damage, weapons that corrupted rather than destroyed, and behind it all, an intelligence that viewed entire civilizations as nothing more than raw materials. On the research station Discovery, human scientists worked alongside Lyrani survivors to understand the enemy's biotechnology. Dr. Amara Osei, humanity's leading xenobiologist, studied tissue samples from destroyed bioships with growing fascination and horror. These organisms aren't naturally evolved, she reported to Admiral Sasaki. They're engineered, designed specifically for different combat roles. Someone or something has been breeding these creatures for war. The implications were staggering. If the bio-creatures were manufactured rather than evolved, it meant there was an intelligence behind them, something capable of interstellar engineering on a scale that dwarfed known technology. What kind of intelligence could create something like this? Sasaki asked. Something that's been doing it for a very long time, Admiral. Based on the genetic markers I'm seeing, these breeding programs have been active for thousands of years, maybe longer. As human forces deployed across the galaxy to investigate reports of bio-creature activity, the scope of the threat became increasingly clear. Worlds that had gone silent months or years ago showed signs of the same systematic harvesting that had devastated Harmony's Rest. Captain Chen led an investigation team to the Kepler system, where a mining colony had stopped responding to communications 6 months earlier. What they found was a graveyard, not just of the colony, but of the entire system's ecosystem. "Sir, it's not just the human settlements," reported her science officer, Commander Atlas Rivera. "The bio-creatures stripped the entire system clean. Planets, asteroids, even the gas giants have been harvested for raw materials." The mining ships that had once extracted resources from Kepler's asteroid belt were gone, replaced by organic structures that had processed the entire system's mass into building materials for more bioships. "How long would something like this take?" Chen asked. "Based on the isotope decay patterns, Admiral, I'd estimate 6 to 8 months. They consumed an entire solar system in less than a year." Reports like this flooded in from across the galaxy as human scouts discovered the true extent of the bio-creatures' activities. Systems that had been marked as communications difficulties or isolated by local conflicts had actually been systematically harvested by the Great Hunger. The political ramifications were immediate. Species that had refused to help the Lyrani suddenly found themselves facing the possibility that they might be next on the harvest list. Emergency sessions of the Galactic Council were called as leaders struggled to comprehend a threat that made their traditional conflicts seem petty by comparison. But while politicians debated, human military forces were taking direct action. Admiral Torres had been given command of the largest fleet in human history, over 300 vessels drawn from every branch of service. "Our mission is simple," she told her assembled captains via holographic conference. "Find the source of these bio-creatures, and destroy it before they can launch their next harvest operation. The intelligence breakthrough came from an unexpected source. The Lyrani survivors, working with human analysts, had managed to decode fragments of communication they'd intercepted during the attack on their world. The bio-creatures aren't autonomous, explained Dr. Kira Thorne, the fleet's xenolinguistics expert. They're receiving orders from something called the Core Collective. Based on the signal analysis, we believe it's located in the Void Reaches, the empty space between galactic arms. The Void Reaches were considered impassable by most species. The vast emptiness between spiral arms contained no stars, no planets, nothing to support conventional life. It was the perfect hiding place for something that didn't want to be found. "How do we even navigate that far into empty space?" asked Captain Nakamura during the fleet briefing. "Very carefully," Torres replied. "We're going to have to carry everything we need: fuel, supplies, spare parts. This will be a one-way trip until we complete the mission." The magnitude of what they were proposing was staggering. Human forces would venture further from Earth than any expedition in history, into regions of space where no rescue would be possible if things went wrong. But the alternative was worse. Intelligence reports suggested that the Great Hunger was preparing for something called the Final Harvest, a simultaneous attack on every inhabited world in the galaxy. As the human fleet prepared for its journey into the Void Reaches, messages of support poured in from unexpected sources. The Lyrani survivors, despite everything they'd endured, insisted on joining the expedition. "You saved us when no one else would," their elder, Harmony Singer-Velter, told Admiral Torres through a translator. "Now we will help you save everyone else." The fleet that finally departed for the Void Reaches was unlike anything in galactic history. Human warships flew alongside vessels from 24 species, all united by the understanding that some threats transcended traditional politics. The journey into the emptiness between stars was a test of endurance unlike anything the crews had experienced. Without stars to navigate by, they had to rely on careful dead reckoning and the hope that their intelligence about the Core Collective's location was accurate. 3 weeks into the journey, their faith was rewarded. Long-range sensors detected something impossible: a structure in the void, far from any natural source of energy or materials. "Admiral, you need to see this," called Commander Wright from the sensor station. "Contact bearing 027, range 50 million kilometers. It's big, sir." The main display showed an image that defied comprehension. The Core Collective wasn't a planet or a space station. It was an artificial construct the size of a small moon, its surface covered in organic growths that pulsed with their own internal light. "Life signs?" Torres asked. "Thousands of different species, Admiral. Some of them are showing up as human." The horrible implications sank in as the fleet drew closer. The Core Collective hadn't just been harvesting aliens. It had been collecting genetic material from every species it encountered, including humans from the colonies that had gone silent in recent years. "All ships, battle stations," Torres ordered. "We end this now." The final battle was unlike anything in human military history. The Core Collective defended itself with bioships that emerged from its organic surface, like antibodies responding to an infection. But these vessels were different from the ones encountered at Harmony's Rest. Larger, more sophisticated, crewed by beings that had once been members of dozens of different species. Captain Rodriguez led a squadron of destroyers against what appeared to be a bioship crewed by corrupted humans. The enemy vessel moved with tactics that were disturbingly familiar, using maneuvers that could only have been learned from human officers. "They're using our own knowledge against us," he reported over the tactical channel. "These things have absorbed everything their victims knew about warfare." But humanity's greatest strength had always been its adaptability. As the battle raged around the Core Collective, human crews developed new tactics faster than their corrupted opponents could adapt. Major Kozlov led the assault on the Core Collective itself, his Marines fighting through organic corridors that pulsed like living arteries. The structure's interior was a nightmare of biological engineering. Walls that breathed, floors that shifted underfoot, and ceiling growths that tracked their movement with unblinking eyes. "Stay together," Kozlov ordered through his helmet comm. Watch for neural clusters. These things feel pain. Let's give them plenty of it. Sergeant Blackwood's squad encountered the first corrupted prisoners 3 levels into the structure. What had once been sentient beings from across the galaxy were now twisted amalgamations of flesh and technology, their minds enslaved to the core collective's will. "Sir, these people," Blackwood's voice cracked over the radio. "They're still conscious. They know what's been done to them." The corrupted beings shambled toward the Marines, their faces showing the agony of minds trapped in bodies they no longer controlled. Some had been human colonists, others were species the Marines didn't recognize. All of them were begging to be freed from their torment. "Rules of engagement?" asked Corporal Echo Martinez, her weapon trained on what had once been a human child. Kozlov closed his eyes for a moment, making the hardest decision of his military career. They're victims, not enemies, but they're suffering. Put them out of their misery. Make it quick. The Marines advanced through the core collective's depths, their weapons speaking mercy to the corrupted prisoners they encountered. Each shot was an act of compassion, freeing trapped minds from bodies that had become prisons. Meanwhile, Admiral Torres coordinated the space battle from the Retribution's bridge. The core collective was spawning bioships faster than the human fleet could destroy them, drawing on reserves of genetic material harvested from dozens of species. "Admiral, structural analysis is complete," reported Commander Garcia. "The core collective has 3 primary neural nexuses controlling different functions. If we can destroy all 3 simultaneously, the whole thing dies," Torres finished. "Signal Captains Chen, Nakamura, and Rodriguez. I want coordinated strikes on all 3 targets." The 3 human vessels broke from the main engagement, each targeting one of the massive nerve clusters that controlled the core collective's functions. The bioships swarmed to intercept them, but the human fleet's screening forces held them back long enough for the attack to commence. Captain Chen aboard the Thunderstrike reached her target first. The neural nexus was a writhing mass of organic tissue the size of a city block, protected by layers of hardened carapace. "All weapons, full power," she ordered. "Burn through to the center." The heavy cruiser's particle cannons carved into the neural cluster, sending waves of agony through the core collective's distributed nervous system. The entire structure convulsed, its organic weapons falling silent as pain overloaded its processing capacity. Captain Nakamura's attack on the second nexus was even more devastating. The Retribution's main guns, designed to crack planetary fortresses, tore through the nerve cluster's defenses like paper. The bioconstruct's death scream echoed through space as critical systems began shutting down. But it was Captain Rodriguez who delivered the killing blow. The lightning dove directly into the third neural nexus, using the destroyer's ram to pierce the protective shell before detonating every weapon in its arsenal at point-blank range. The explosion vaporized the Lightning and its crew, but also destroyed the core collective's primary control center. Without central coordination, the massive bioconstruct began tearing itself apart as competing biological systems fought for dominance. "All ships, emergency withdrawal," Torres ordered. "Get clear before this thing comes apart completely." Deep inside the dying structure, Major Kozlov's Marines were fighting their way toward what intelligence had identified as the core collective's primary memory banks. If they could recover the data stored there, humanity might be able to track down other installations before they could launch their final harvest. "Movement ahead," reported Sergeant Blackwood as they approached a massive chamber at the structure's heart. "Something big, sir." What they found in the central chamber defied description. The core collective's controlling intelligence wasn't a single entity, but a merged consciousness created from the minds of thousands of harvested beings. The resulting hybrid was both magnificent and horrific, a godlike intellect powered by endless suffering. The entity spoke to them through organic speakers that grew from the walls, its voice a chorus of every species it had consumed. "Humans, your interference has delayed the inevitable. The final harvest will proceed, with or without this installation." "Not if we have anything to say about it," Kozlov replied, raising his weapon toward the central processing core. "You understand nothing," the entity continued. "We are salvation. We transform the weak into the strong, the chaotic into the ordered. Your precious individuality is a cancer that prevents true unity. Unity through slavery isn't unity, Kozlov said. It's just a different kind of death. The Marines opened fire on the processing core, their weapons tearing into the biological computer that housed the merged consciousness. As the system died, the entity's voice became increasingly fragmented, the individual minds that comprised it beginning to separate. "Thank you," whispered voices in dozens of languages as the trapped consciousnesses were finally freed. "Thank you for letting us die as ourselves." The core collective's collapse was visible from across the solar system. The massive bioconstruct imploded as its cellular structure lost cohesion, becoming a cloud of organic debris that would drift in the void for millennia. Admiral Torres watched the destruction from the Retribution's bridge, feeling a mixture of triumph and sorrow. They'd won, but the cost had been staggering. The Lightning and her crew were gone, along with hundreds of other personnel who had died fighting the bioships. "Casualty report?" she asked quietly. 47 ships damaged, 12 destroyed, Commander Harper reported. Personnel losses, 2,316 confirmed dead, sir. Each number represented someone who had volunteered to venture into the void, knowing they might not return. They died fighting to protect species they'd never met, defending the principle that innocent life was worth any sacrifice. But their sacrifice had revealed something crucial. As the intelligence teams analyzed data recovered from the core collective, they discovered the locations of 17 other installations scattered across the galaxy. The final harvest was being coordinated from multiple points, each one capable of launching simultaneous attacks on inhabited worlds. "Admiral, priority transmission from Terran High Command," Harper announced. Admiral Sasaki appeared on the main screen, her expression grim but determined. "Congratulations on your victory, Isabella. Now we need to discuss what comes next." The briefing that followed outlined the scope of the threat they still faced. While the core collective had been destroyed, the other installations were already beginning to compensate for its loss. Intelligence suggested they would accelerate their timeline, launching the final harvest within months rather than years. "We can't fight 17 installations with what we have left," Torres said. "We need help." "You're getting it," Sasaki replied. "Every species that ignored the Lyroni distress call has suddenly found ships available for joint operations. Funny how an existential threat focuses the mind. The armada that assembled over the next weeks was the largest military force in galactic history. Human vessels flew alongside former enemies, united by the understanding that some threats transcended old grudges. Even the proud Altarian Federation contributed their newest dreadnoughts to the effort. But it was the Lyrani survivors who provided the most valuable contribution. Their experiences during the Harvest of Harmony's Rest had given them unique insights into the biocreature's tactics and psychology. "They feed on fear," Harmony Singer-Veltar explained to the assembled fleet commanders. "The terror of their victims makes the harvesting process more efficient, but fear is also their weakness. They don't understand beings who refuse to surrender to despair." The final campaign against the remaining installations was a masterclass in coordinated warfare. 17 fleets launched simultaneous attacks across the galaxy, each targeting a different bioconstruct before they could support each other. Admiral Torres led the assault on the largest installation, located in the galactic core, where radiation made conventional ships vulnerable. The bioconstruct there had grown for millennia, feeding on the energy of dying stars to power its harvesting operations. "Radiation levels are off the charts," reported Commander Wright as they approached their target. "Hull integrity is going to be a problem, Admiral." "Then we better make this quick," Torres replied. "All ships, attack formation Delta. Hit them fast before the radiation cooks us." The battle at the galactic core lasted only hours, but they were hours of the most intense combat any of the crews had ever experienced. The ancient bioconstruct fought with the accumulated knowledge of countless harvested civilizations, its weapon systems adapted from technologies developed across thousands of years. But humanity's greatest advantage had always been its ability to improvise. When conventional weapons proved insufficient, Captain Nakamura ordered his ship's reactor to overload. turning the retribution itself into a weapon that could crack the bioconstruct's core. "All hands, abandon ship," he ordered calmly. "It's been an honor serving with you." The explosion that followed lit up the galactic core, visible from star systems hundreds of light years away. The ancient bioconstruct died in that light, its millennia of accumulated knowledge burning away in nuclear fire. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy as 17 fleets delivered simultaneous death blows to the Final Harvest installations. The bioconstructs died one by one, their threat to galactic civilization ending in explosions that briefly outshone stars. When the last installation fell, Admiral Sasaki addressed the galaxy from Earth, her words carried to every inhabited world by the quantum communication network. Today, representatives of 43 species prove that no threat is too great when free beings stand together. The great hunger is ended, but the lessons we've learned must never be forgotten. She paused, looking directly into the camera with eyes that had seen too much war, but still held hope for peace. "We learned that indifference is the ally of evil. We learned that someone must be willing to stand in the darkness when monsters threaten the innocent. And we learned that the greatest strength any species can possess is the willingness to sacrifice for others." The aftermath of the Final Harvest campaign reshaped galactic politics forever. The species that had stood together in the face of extinction found themselves bound by bonds stronger than any treaty. The Terran-Lyrani alliance became the foundation for a new kind of interstellar cooperation, based not on trade or territorial agreements, but on shared values. On the rebuilt world of New Harmony, Lyrani artists worked alongside human engineers to create monuments to the fallen. The crystal spires that rose from the planet's surface carried the names of every being who had died fighting the Great Hunger, their light serving as a beacon for any who might threaten innocent life in the future. Major Kozlov, promoted to colonel after his actions at the Core Collective, stood before one such monument as the sun set over New Harmony's capital. The names etched in crystals seemed to glow with their own internal light, a reminder of the price of freedom. "Sir?" Sergeant Blackwood approached, now wearing the insignia of a lieutenant. "The survivors want to hold a remembrance ceremony. They're asking if you'd like to say something." Kozlov nodded, thinking of the corrupted prisoners they'd been forced to mercy kill in the Core Collective's depths. Some sacrifices were harder to bear than others, but they were no less necessary. "Tell them I'll be honored to speak," he said. "Someone should remember what we learned out there." As he walked toward the ceremony, Kozlov reflected on the words that had become humanity's unofficial motto since the campaign. Someone has to be willing to stand in the darkness. It wasn't about glory or conquest. It was about the simple recognition that in a universe full of wonders and horrors, someone had to be willing to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. The ceremony that evening was attended by representatives of every species that had participated in the Final Harvest campaign. As Kozlov spoke about sacrifice and remembrance, his words were translated into dozens of languages and broadcast across the galaxy. But perhaps the most important audience was the children, Lyrani, human, and others, who listened with the wide eyes of those who had never known a galaxy where monsters hunted freely between the stars. They would grow up in a universe where the response to a single distress call had proven that no threat was too great, no distance too far, when innocent beings called for help. And in the deep monitoring stations scattered across human space, communications officers maintained their eternal vigil, listening for voices in the dark that might need someone to answer their call. After all, someone had to be willing to stand guard against the night, the end.